Welcome, everyone, to our January open house for Career Strategy Lab, open house slash QA about the UX job search. Why do we do these? Well, number one, there is a lot of doom and gloom on LinkedIn. And frankly, I'm so sick of seeing it. And yeah, the job market is tough. And at the same time, people are getting hired. And I think sometimes the doom and gloom kind of gets elevated on social media and in our circles. And so we do these open houses to share the stories of people who've recently got hired and or who are in the middle of a job search so that you can hear some positive stories, hopefully some encouraging and uplifting stories from these people, and a chance to kind of see and hear behind the scenes of what goes on in Career Strategy Lab, our 3-month UX job search accelerator, and have a chance to ask our team questions, ask other people questions who've been a part of Career Strategy Lab. So what we have lined up for today, we have John. So that's our game plan. And I'm going to pull up my notes here because we have a lot to cover and I want to keep myself on track because sometimes I go on tangents. John, tell us about your journey so far, because John is still in the middle of Career Strategy Lab.
Yep. But yeah, so I'm John. I'm in Austin, Texas. I've been a product designer for about 12 years, and I'm currently seeking like principal product designer roles. Let's see, I had gotten laid off in May, and I think I spent like the first 3 months after the layoff like spinning on my portfolio. And I think everybody has done this where you like redesign it and you're like, it's not good enough, and redesign it again, and then a third time. And what you realize at some point is you just don't have any feedback from the job market. Like maybe you're not getting responses, or the companies just aren't that interesting. And it's like, why is this happening? I have no idea. Like, I don't actually know what people are wanting to see in this market. Like the last time I got hired was 2022. So my portfolio was okay for that market, but it wasn't for this one. And so I joined Career Strategy Lab in September. And I think the thing I noticed was that like you step away from your portfolio as opposed to like approaching that first, and you really get down to like the framework. You're like writing down like what project did you work on? Like what did you do in that project? And it was something that I hadn't done on my portfolio. But as a product designer, you do this stuff all the time. But it's just like there's something about it, your portfolio, for some reason you treat differently. And so it was, I think that was like a really helpful approach, because not only does it give you like the breadth of what you've done in your past, it also just like brings up a lot of details that I had forgotten. Like, oh yeah, I did that. Oh yeah, like this is great. Like, so I think actually I got a lot of confidence from just writing all this stuff down. Even before I approached like the portfolio and resume writing part, I felt like I approached it with more confidence. So, and then what I noticed after I got like a much better, what I would call better portfolio in, I think like November, I immediately was able to interview with kind of like better companies that were like more suited to what I wanted to do, had like more mature design offerings. Like I noticed the change. Like there was very definitely a change. Like before I was interviewing with kind of like low maturity design orgs. And then after, I think the maturity I'm able to approach and who are interested in me has gotten a lot better. So I see that as a sign that like the work that I did on the portfolio and like the framework has really helped. So yeah, so right now I'm interviewing with 2 companies for a principal product designer role. And yeah, like it's been a minute, and I'm practicing my interviewing skills, and kind of like every piece of this, you just work really hard at it, from the resume, the portfolio, and now to interviewing. And it's just like there's no, like in this market, there's no, you can't just waltz in and be like, here's my history and here's a couple projects. So you got to be really on point, especially for the more senior roles. I mean, I guess at any role, I feel like the community has helped a lot in getting feedback about like what I should expect, how I should prepare, stuff like that. So that was a rambling response to that.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so valuable for people to hear your experience as someone who is literally day by day, week by week in the middle of your job search, and the difference that, like you said, stepping back from just your portfolio and zooming out to really look at the details and depth of what you did, so that, number one, I think you can believe that you did those things and then articulate that more clearly in your portfolio. And I remember, I think you said this because John presented a project from his portfolio at our demo day a couple of weeks ago. We do these portfolio demo days once a month where people get to practice presenting their portfolio. And I think you'd previously presented that in an interview a few days prior, and you received like really great feedback about it, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah. No, it was, yeah, the demo was helpful, just like a good practice run through. And then there were some like feedback that I was able to like make some, I don't know, corrections, just like, hey, the narrative's a little sticky here, or like, I think you could explain things better here. And that was helpful, like going into interviews, because like, I feel even more confident about kind of like what I've got. So, and yeah, just like talking publicly kind of gets your stress level up a little bit, and it does a decent job of like duplicating the stress of an interview. So I think that is really helpful as well, like to be able to like stress yourself a little bit, because that's what it's like in an interview, is it's a stressful situation.
right. Yeah, I love these kind of just quick backstories, if you will, because it helps set the context of your situation. And I think it would really be valuable for people to hear a little bit more about kind of the before and after stories. And so maybe we can shift focus a little bit into talking about like thinking back to before you joined Career Strategy Lab. What were you struggling with? That could be tactical stuff like this, and this with my resume, or it could be more confidence and mindset stuff. But I'm curious if anything jumps out to you.
Yeah. Let's see. I had gone through a couple like redesigns and revisions of my portfolio website, and I was working full time essentially on trying to get this portfolio and resume to a good level. And I think at the end of like 3 or 4 months, I was just like burned out. And I was like, I kind of felt like I don't even know what to do next, because I've put so much energy into this and people aren't responding. So obviously there's something I'm not doing, but I don't know what it is, because I've tried a bunch of different things, so I think I was just experiencing some burnout, and just feeling like, as a product designer, you're used to being able to talk to your users. And even though I had reached out to recruiters and hiring managers, like nobody was getting back to me. So it's just like, I have no context for the work that I'm doing. I have no framework for understanding how it's being perceived, and I have no way to iterate it to a better place. So yeah, I think that was a place where I was at, and I was probably there for a month, I think. And then I joined Career Strategy Lab, and maybe the obvious thing in hindsight was stepping away from like design work, like trying to lay this out in Figma, or even like writing the project like on, like my site is on WordPress. So I was like writing and like laying in images, and even doing that work, like stepping back from that even further and developing the framework of the project. So I think breaking the project down into like these minute details like helped me see the project from like a much higher level. And then it helped me reconstruct the narrative in a way that I think was way more interesting. And then what my feeling was, a little resistant to the PDF portfolio. But then, like, as I started working on it in slides, I kind of realized that there's like a little more control. There's like a linear nature to a PDF document, and you have a little more control in terms of telling a story, like that people kind of have to scroll past, versus a website. I think people just ping around a little bit. I'm like, I have no idea if people are like making it through the whole narrative or not. And that's pretty frustrating. Like I need a little bit of control when they're like looking at this. And I think the PDF gives you just a little bit more like linear scrolling or something like that. So yeah, so I had done 3 versions of my website, and then did a whole. Now my portfolio is like 128 slides with 3 case studies, and the case studies are way better than they were on my website. And I think a lot of that is just the work it takes to like break it down into the minute detail and then build it back up. And then I think you have us focus on the imagery, like the very last step. It's like, okay, write the headlines, now write the subheadlines, now write some body copy. Okay, finally lay the image in. I was like, oh, I was doing this all backwards. So yeah, I just think the whole process was like helpful to step through. And then I don't know, it also a lot of work. I'm not gonna say it wasn't challenging or just like again, it was like another 3 months of a full-time role. I just like put that much into it. And so it kind of took the month of December off a little bit. It's not like I wasn't applying, I just was like less active in CSL. And so now I'm back kind of like really focusing on like the job search, being active on LinkedIn, and then interviewing, like interviewing skills and how to be a successful presenter.
Right. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it's so helpful for people to hear what your experience was before and like as you are in the trenches of your CSL experience. And I think that that point you made about portfolios is really interesting, and you articulated it so well in saying that this concept of a portfolio as a presentation versus a website allows you to have more control because, as you said, like someone lands on your website or your dribble page or whatever, and like they're hopping around who knows where, right? And at least
Hmm.
with a presentation, yes, of course, they could go from page 7 to 21 and 3 and who knows what. But
Hmm.
in reality, most people are going to go in a more linear way. And I think, too, another reason that the portfolio presentation is very powerful, really, I make this recommendation really from like a product management standpoint, because when I created Career Strategy Lab, I was thinking like, how do we save people time and energy and just frustration in making their portfolio? And having this portfolio presentation, it can be used, as we've heard, when you apply for the job. And the same thing, the same document can be used when you go to an interview. So some people choose to make a shorter version, fine, do whatever you want, but so many people in Career Strategy Lab are using the same version that they're applying to the job with when they
Hmm.
go to the interview, which I think is such a mindset shift from what is kind of like blasted all over LinkedIn, etc. This whole job search thing, like you really have to put on your product manager hat, and you only have a certain amount of time and energy, right? And so I think, as some of you have articulated, like having this step by step process to follow kind of takes some of the decision making out of, you sit down on a Thursday night and you think, I'm going to work on this. And then you spend 45 minutes thinking, oh, what am I going to do? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was maybe like emotionally easier just because I felt like, okay, I'm finally doing the right thing. But in terms of like the work I put in, like the amount of work was relatively the same for like what I had done in the past and what I had done for this. But I felt like the end output was like a much, it was a portfolio that was just getting me better outcomes.
Mm,
Yeah. So you still work hard. It's not like a shortcut, but I think the framework is what makes it so helpful. And I never felt like I'm working on something that's just not going to be successful, or I'm working
mm.
on something that is going to go into the void. As it started to take shape, I was like, oh damn, like this is probably the best presentation of myself that I've ever done. So I think there was some like pride and confidence that came out of like that process of like building the portfolio up for sure. And the resume as well. But like I feel like the framework that you do at the beginning, like the writing, kind of like translate into both the resume and the portfolio. Anyways, rambling.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think too, like, I feel like today's theme is really around, it is so important to do the research on you, which the irony of this, right? Like, step back and do some user research on yourself to figure out, what do you want to do in the future? What have you done in the
Mhm.
past? And have you maybe only skimmed the surface of what you've done in the past? Because that is what we see so many people do, not because they didn't put great effort into trying to make the first version of their portfolio or their resume or whatever, but because when you do this in a isolated scenario or in a silo, it's very easy to downplay your experience. And I think it's very easy to get into that comparison trap, right? You see some case study on Medium, you see some portfolio on LinkedIn, etc. And then you start to think, oh, maybe I'm not as good as at design systems as I thought, or at research as I thought. And you go tweak your portfolio for 3 hours on a Saturday, right? And so I think it's really important to do that research on yourself up front, as we've heard today.
Just one last thing. I know I'm talking a lot, so
No,
I'll shut
this
up
is
after this,
great.
but I would say that like I think the reason, at least for me, why I didn't do the self-reflection was like I'm like you said on LinkedIn, I'm like, okay, doom and gloom, the job market is like crazy. I have to just take whatever is out there versus like, no, I still need to be really selective about the type of company I go to that I'm going to be successful in. Because chances are, if you see you're going to be successful, like that's interesting to the interviewer and interesting to the recruiter, and like that whole funnel I think gets stronger when you have that strong awareness of like really what you're looking for. But I think just yeah, anyways, I think for me the market kind of dictated how much I was willing to be like selective or like what do I really want.
All right. Our last question that I want to wrap up with is really around, what would you say to someone who's considering joining Career Strategy Lab? And we could also sprinkle in if you have any advice for them. So maybe if they're on the fence.
Yep. Yeah. So advice. Yeah. I mean, I would say like obviously like there's a price thing, and if you've been laid off, like money can be tight. So I think the question you always ask yourself is like, okay, like regardless of the price, like what's the value that I'm going to get out of this? And like just for transparency, like so I joined the 3 month. I've now re-upped for a fourth month, and I'll probably end up doing a fifth month as well. Hopefully, fingers crossed, like that will be the last month that I'll need it, but we'll see. Yeah, so I just think the question you always have is like behind the veil, is the value going to be there for me? That's the question I was asking, and I can tell you after like 3 or 4 months, like it's been a huge value, and I feel like I said, like I've gotten to a place where I'm like at the best possible presentation of myself that I've ever had. To the point where I'm like, look, if this can't get me a job, like I don't know, maybe like the world needs more HVAC repairmen or something. Like so I think it just really helped me improve my self presentation. And like there's no question in my mind that the value I got from whatever the initial amount was to get in has been more than repaid. And then I think that's from like the coursework, like the opportunities to like demo, and then from the community as well. Like the community is a really valuable part of it, that we haven't really talked about. But like you get access to a lot of people who are just like in the same boat that you are, kind of like negotiating with employers in the same way. And so it's just like you feel alone when you do it alone, and it's just nice to have a group of people that you can talk to about stuff. So yeah, I don't think there's any question in my mind that like, would you do it again or would you recommend it? Like the answer to both is like 100% yes.
Thank you for bringing up the community too, because how the heck did I forget that? But yes, the Career Strategy Lab community is so powerful and magical. Can I say that? But the reason it's magical is this, because we're now at the point where people who got hired 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 4 years ago, are coming back to the community and saying, my team's hiring, send me your resume with the subject line, blah, 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 and I'll consider you type thing. Like we just had 2 of them this week, I think, posted in the community. So the community is helpful, like in the workflow of doing your resume, portfolio, et cetera, and getting that support and feedback and camaraderie with people. And it continues even after you leave Career Strategy Lab. So yes, it's very magical to see those posts. It's like just very full circle for me to see this finally starting to happen after so many years, and just have the volume of people to have this happening pretty consistently now. So, all right, that wraps up this open house, where I'm going to let Sean go back to whatever you're doing for the rest of the day. I know everyone really appreciates you taking the time to share your stories. So thank you so much. So That's all, guys. Thank you for spending your afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are. And we'll see you again sometime somewhere. So that's all. Bye, everyone.